Welcome to my 171st video on my work with OO gauge. In this part I'll be dealing with my efforts to provide a backdrop for my Hornby Dublo 3-rail tabletop railway. But first a slight digression. I had positioned my Dublo metal footbridge as seen here behind the TPO equipment, bridging the two tracks leading to the station. I thought that appeared to be fine until I tried to move trains to get ready for the backdrop mounting process. I tried to pull the Royal Scot train that I was running in my previous video into the station track behind the island platform, the lower of the two station tracks as seen here, and I couldn't get the train into that track. Both the coaches and the locomotive were hitting the footbridge. The footbridge might bridge two tracks okay when the bridge ends were standing on the ground if the two tracks were close together. Certainly the footbridge will bridge two tracks if its ends are standing on platforms, but the way the two tracks are running into my station, there was no way that the footbridge could cross both tracks without trains hitting it. The ends of the footbridge are of course much lower than the centre, and if the bridge is standing on the ground, really only the centre is high enough for it to clear trains. I don't have room to put the bridge between the two platforms of my station as it is at the moment, even if I wanted to. I guess you'd have to have extended platforms for that to be possible, especially the large station has very little platform space clear of the building. So this was about the only way I could see to place the bridge. It provides a way of getting from the level crossing to the island platform, but if passengers want to get between the island platform and the other platform, I guess they're just going to have to walk down the ramps at the far end and round the buffer stop at the end of the track. Not ideal, but this isn't exactly a very realistic layout. I suppose I could run the two tracks closer together, taking out the half straight after the point branches, and then have both tracks between the two platforms. I'm not sure if I'd be able to bridge across both tracks without obstructing trains if I did that. I guess I could experiment with the tracks to the engine shed, which are spaced like that. Anyway, for now, on to the main subject of this part, the backdrop. I wanted to put some kind of backdrop behind the tabletop, rather than just having trains running past the Venetian blind, but I wasn't too sure what to use. I didn't think that the kind of English countryside backdrop that I've used on my other layouts would really be appropriate here. I felt that the tabletop had rather more of an urban feel. Size was also an issue. Ideally, I wanted something that would go right across the back of the tabletop, which is 6 feet. Pico makes some back scenes that would be quite appropriate in terms of their content, but even the largest size that they make would really be too small for the 6-foot table back. I finally settled on this. Not exactly ideal. It's a German backdrop and does have more of a continental feel, but I couldn't find anything in an appropriate size that I felt any better about. This is just over 6 feet in length and just over a foot in height. I'm afraid that I just can't get used to metric measurements in terms of having any actual feel for them. Well, I can just about deal with a few millimeters, but when I grew up and went to school, I learned to think in inches, feet, yards, and miles, and I'm afraid I still do. This backdrop is actually two-sided, providing a day scene on one side and the same scene at night on the other side. That's quite a nice idea, although I don't see that I'll actually be making use of it. Here's the description on the back of the box. There is English in the third column, although it may be a bit hard to read there. I got the backdrop out of the box. It came in 2 sections, which I hadn't honestly expected. I got confused between two-sided and 2 sections, both of which, as it turned out, applied. Having been rolled up for a long while, the sections really didn't want to lie flat, hence the books holding down the ends. Here are the 2 sections turned over to show the night side. The instructions claim that if you put a light behind, it will even seem to shine through the windows and the lamps. In order to try to persuade the sections more in the direction of lying flat, I rolled them up in the opposite way to the came, and then put them into a tube for a while. That is, I rolled them with what used to be the outside and the inside, so I was trying to force the curve the opposite way to take it out. Meanwhile, I thought long and hard about how to mount this backdrop behind the tabletop. I'd originally sort of thought that I could just tack it up somehow, but clearly that wasn't really going to work, especially since the Venetian blind for the large front window went almost all of the way across the back of the tabletop. I decided that I was going to have to mount the backdrop on a rod of some kind and hang it. Well, I did consider the possibility of trying to make some kind of board to which to attach the backdrop, which I've done before, but I decided that the hanging idea seemed more promising. I haven't had the best success with trying to put backdrops on boards before. I screwed brackets into the top of the window frame through which I could pass cord to suspend the backdrop. I bought a bunch of odds and ends to assist in this process, mostly from a dollar store. The cord, of course, is for the suspension. The hooks at the back left are to screw into the rod on which the backdrop will be mounted. The buckle things to the right of the cord are to go on the ends of the suspension cords so that the hooks on the rod can be fitted into them. The white clamps are to hold the other ends of the cords to allow me to adjust them. And the round things with screws, which are actually intended as sort of feet for furniture, I bought to assist me in screwing the clamps to the sides of the window frame, as the holes in the clamps are actually too big for screws to be used directly. The screws would just go right through the holes. This picture was supposed to show how I used the round pads with their screws to attach the clamps to the window frame, but I didn't manage to get my new camera to focus properly for this one. So you can't see the round pad and the screw very well. Still, you can see the idea. The screw is going through the circular pad and holding the clamp firmly to the window frame, and then the clamp will hold the cord and allow me to adjust it. I did try to find something made more specifically for adjusting cords like this, but I couldn't find anything suitable for sale locally, hence this improvisation. Here's one of the suspension cords set up. The buckle thing is attached to the loop at the end of the cord, then the cord passes through the bracket on the top of the frame, and the other end of the cord is held in the clamp, allowing the height to be adjusted. And here's the one at the other end. This one just goes straight up and down, as that was how the window frame lined up with the tabletop. Here's a closer view of the ends of the other cord. It's a bit of a kludge, but I think it should work. I had a piece of 2x1 wood left over from when I framed the board for my regular Hornby layout. I cut that to the right length for the backdrop, which was a bit over 6 foot, about 6 foot 7 inches, and marked where the suspension cords were going to come. Then I drilled the top of the 2x1 and screwed in hooks at the appropriate places. Those hooks could then nicely fit into the buckles, making mounting the rod quite easy. You can see the hook in the buckle here, and here's the 2x1 hung over the back of the table just to verify that the suspension system is working okay. Next step, of course, will be to mount the backdrop to the piece of wood. Well, before mounting the backdrop to the 2x1, I wanted to join up the two sections of the backdrop as neatly as possible. I'd laid it flat for a day or so. Now I rolled it up tightly backwards one more time to try to get it to lie as flat as I could. Here's where the two sections of the backdrop join up, seen on the day side. The two sections are printed to allow for about a ½ inch of overlap. If you look at the roof of the building, the white line seen right at the edge of the left section is the left upright of the window frame, which is seen on the right section. I overlapped the two sections as precisely as I could, and then taped them with invisible tape. Of course, the tape won't really be entirely invisible, but honestly I thought that this was a better bet than trying to glue the two sections together. Then I turned the backdrop over and taped the other side. I had it on a rigid foam tile when doing this to provide a flat surface. The next step was to attach the joined-up backdrop to the 2x1. I planned to use double-sided tape for this. I stuck double-sided tape all along the front of the 2x1. Specifically, I used Scotch carpet tape, as this was about the same width as the 2x1. Then I peeled off the cover on the other side of the tape. You can see some of that at the bottom right in this picture. And I smoothed the top of the backdrop over the sticky surface of the tape on the 2x1 as evenly as I could manage. Will it stay stuck on? I certainly hope so. If it tends to peel off, I'll have to resort to additional attachment measures. I took the 2x1 with the backdrop attached to the tabletop and hung it by the hooks from the weighting buckles on the cords. I was pleased that this actually worked quite smoothly. I deliberately kept the cords a bit higher for this initial mounting. Then I lowered the cords down using the adjustment clamps so that the bottom of the backdrop sat just lower than the back of the tabletop. The backdrop's still curling a bit at the ends, but I was fairly happy with the result. Seen here is the backdrop behind the signal cabin. The tape join in the backdrop sections is right in the middle there, but it really isn't all that obvious. Here's the end section. I guess the buildings are a bit strange for a small English town, but I do think that it's better than just seeing the Venetian blind. I might change it in future if I find something more suitable in content and the right size. A final note. I made changes to the station tracks as I mentioned as possible at the beginning of this video. I removed the half straight coming from the branching point to the station, connected the half curve directly to the point branch, and then put the half straight back on the other side of the half curve, thus bringing the two tracks closer together. And together with this change to the tracks, of course, I moved the island platform so that now instead of being an island between the two tracks, it's actually on the far side of the two tracks from the large station platform. This really seems to be a more sensible station setup. And with the platforms and the tracks set up like this, trains running on both tracks can, in fact, get under the bridge, though there isn't very much room to spare. So there we are, a new arrangement for the station and a new backdrop.